Right. Well, go for it, Mark.
Patrick, I'm just going to very quickly introduce you, and then I'll turn my cameras off when you instruct us doing this. I just want to thank all of you, really, and just to sort of talk about how this all started. Is Steve wrote, I just think, a fantastic book at a fantastic moment, and it really spoke to me. And Steve knows it really spoke to me because I was messaging him from my hammock as I was reading it, and I think I swallowed it in more or less sort of half a bottle or 2/3 of a bottle of an evening. It was a very readable book. Yeah, it was a very, very readable book. But I feel that this industry, and I've got a really privileged job in this industry, that I get to speak to and see so many fantastic leaders, and there are so many different points of view. I feel this industry is, at the moment, it has got a couple of different big points of view. But the people that are expressing that point of view, it seems to me, are pretty similar types of people. That I meet people in advertising, they're intelligent and they're empathetic and they are commercially minded. I seem to meet broadly the same kinds of characters, phenomenal people, but they seem to have, over the last 5 or so years, such different points of view have started to come out. And I just felt that tonight was a phenomenal opportunity to bring some people that I massively love and respect, that my students can learn so much from, but who have a separate point of view, and see if we can build bridges and tunnels and time warps and all sorts of things, so that we can try and connect these dots between these different views of the industry. And so to do that, I turn to Patrick. You are clearly one of the wisest and nicest people in the industry. We all know that. My students met you today, and they know that. Through the people that you've taught, whether it's organizations like IPA and D&AD and similar, my school, to directory, to Caples, there's wisdom there. Steve, your book was the catalyst, and my students will get to know you, I hope, through the year, through not just this book, but my goodness, you've written some phenomenal books, right? I mean, your Gossage book is my favorite book in advertising, but How to Do Better Creative Work is a Bible of advertising. Tim, you know how much I love and respect you. I'm trying to hire you. I think you're brilliant, and an absolute sage. And you know, so you know, the values, the morals of this industry. We're so lucky, I think, to have you around in our industry. And Laura, my mate, who's hired my very first ever student when we started, has been a friend and a sponsor of my school for a decade. Yeah, definitely, I would consider family. So I'm really excited tonight. I brought people together, as you'll see, that I just love and respect and admire, and I've learned so much from. But we're going to see that are different. Patrick, I hand it over to you to work out how we connect these dots and build these bridges and square these circles.
Okay, well, just before I kick off, a tiny bit of housekeeping. And the housekeeping is that we're going to have this debate. We'll chat about, do agencies have a point? But then towards the end, talking about your family, Mark, you're one of these lucky people who has a new family every year. And so you've got a new family, and I met them today. And I think at the end of this evening's session, we're going to do a little name changing bit, aren't we? So can you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, every year our intake gets a new experience, a new story that we tell that is really me riffing on what I believe our industry needs from the students. This year's story was written before Steve's book came out, but it's really, there's a real parallel with Steve's book. The story this year is what's the point? And it's what's the point of agencies? What's the point of what we do? Are we here to sell? Are we here to change the world and make it a better place? Or can we do, and should we try and do both? And so the students later on will show some videos, their ideas for their name for their year, and we'll invite you, if you don't mind, to vote for your favorite from the 3 that I've shortlisted.
Great. So that'll be in about an hour and 4 minutes time. And so in the meantime, if I could ask you to mute until it's your turn to talk, and audience, if you could mute as well. that would be great. So, as I said, before I kick off, a little bit of housekeeping. You know what the run is going to be. We'll get to the this year's intake of students at the very end and have a look at what they've been up to. But up until then, what we've got is 3 principal speakers. And all 3 in their own ways have said that they would rather talk about the issues with you guys involved rather than just talk at each other for an hour. So it is really important out there that the audience gets involved. And so again, the speakers, when I at one stage was offering them more time, all went, no, what we want is to talk about this. So in terms of running order, I'm going to ask Steve to go first, and he'll get about 10 minutes or so. Then I'll ask Tim to go for 5 minutes or so, whatever he feels comfortable with. And then finally, Laura, which means after 25 minutes or so, then I'll open the conversation out. So please ask questions. I will try and keep an eye here. I've got the chat but open on the right. So I'll read your questions and feed them to whichever one of the panelists you want to aim it at first. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that people in our industry are often passionate, and that's great. Passion is marvelous, but please, no abuse. You know, I know sometimes that people do get really wound up about things, but let's try and give respect today, because the industry is at a turning point, and so people do feel passionate about it, but do give all of the speakers and your compadres out there in the audience the right to express their opinions. And when I talk about respect, well, actually, I've got enormous respect for the 3 people you're going to hear tonight. And Steve, of course, and I go back a very long way. Steve, I watched in admiration as he left Ogilvy One when I was the creative director of Ogilvy and Mather. And he went off and started his own business and used the power of creativity to make brand response a very real and very sharp marketing tool. And by the way, I think brand response is due for a comeback about now. Tim Lindsey was the charismatic MD of BBH, of Y&R. He headed up Publicis, and he has always invested in the power of creativity to make a difference. So at a time when D&AD was losing its way, Tim came in and managed to bring left brain and right brain together to save D&AD, as indeed I think you're doing again. But Tim, the biggest respect for you is having a look at LinkedIn earlier today and seeing that you were at St Andrew's Touring, because probably a few years ahead of you, I was just down the road at St Mary's in Nairobi, and subsequently became a teacher at the Banda School. So big respect for a fellow Kenyan.
Hey, that's good to know.
Yeah. So habari. So Laura, for all of you out there, is probably one of the most dynamic people I've ever met in my life. And I mean that what she is this kind of astonishing dynamo. You know, if we're going to talk about brand purpose at all this evening, and I suspect we're going to, Laura is somebody who's lived her entire life with purpose. And she's one of these people who walks the walk as well as talking the talk. And what I mean by that, there are disparities and there are iniquities in our industry, but instead of moaning about them or writing to campaign about them, what Laura has done is stuff. She's the founder of She Says, which is a global network that supports women creatives. And boy, have they done a fantastic job. And so we've got 3 speakers, all of whom, you know, in their different ways have been of great influence on me. So before I ask them to talk, I thought I would set things up a bit, if that's okay. Even if it's not okay, I'm going to do it anyway, because I feel in some ways responsible for Steve's book and for this evening happening, because back in 2018, when I just bought the Caples Award, which sounds really posh, doesn't it? I bought the Caples Awards. I actually paid $1 for it because it was a bit of a busted flush, and I've been trying to resurrect it. But anyway, positing myself as a big businessman. When I bought the cables, I asked Steve if he'd do the inaugural address to the jury. And I gave him as a topic of conversation, why are we embarrassed about selling stuff? He said, because in my other life, as the editor of Directory, I'd seen brands beginning to acquire purpose. And to be honest, I thought it was absolutely fabulous. You know, I got really, really exciting. But in 2018, I noticed at Cannes that out of 26 Grand Prix, only 4 had a clear commercial purpose. And I began to get a little worried about it. So I saw a huge irony here, which was that as agencies were getting more and more excited and more behind purpose, they seemed to be losing purpose themselves. And so what we began to see was what Alan Jope, who is the CEO of Unilever, started calling woke. And he came to Cannes in 2019 to warn the industry against being woke, which he called was just virtue signaling. It's kind of fake, and that people would see through the fakery and advertising itself would be massively damaged by this. But you know, it's not just advertising that is talking about all of this at the moment. I mean, Piers Morgan published a book only last week called Wake Up, you know, and what he's saying is, has the world gone nuts? And he thinks that the world definitely has gone nuts. And I think that is the same question that Steve is asking in his book, not has the world gone nuts, but has advertising gone nuts? And so for me, that's the question that I'm going to be putting to Steve in a moment. Personally, I think it's about defining terms. You know, I think brands having a purpose and brands serving a purpose are not the same thing at all. And I am a big believer in brands serving a purpose, just as I'm a big believer that agencies serve a purpose when they help their clients sell their products and services, because that keeps an economy turning over and it keeps people in jobs. I guess the big subject for debate is how you serve that purpose. You know, and we've already had talk today of Milton Friedman and that kind of hideous form of capitalism that says that the shareholder is absolutely what business is all about. But then there's a new softer capitalism which says that all businesses need to incorporate, as well as their shareholders, their staff and their customers. So in his book, Can't Sell, Won't Sell, Steve's last chapter is entitled What I'd Do If I Was You. And I don't suppose he is going to start up again, but if he was back in an agency, then he seems to suggest that there are plenty of things that can be done. He seems to suggest that advertising agencies of one sort or another do most definitely still have a point. Steve, can you tell us what you think that point is? You need to unmute now.
Thank you. Is that better? Okay. If you don't mind, Patrick, I'm going to address my answer to the students who've just enrolled at the SCA for the next 12 months. And maybe if we can come to some kind of agreement on what that answer is, it will be applicable to the rest of the industry. I think that Mark, the Dean of Studies at the SCA, will probably, I hope he'll be nodding in agreement when I say that the point of you being at the SCA is to pick up the skills that will enable you to build brands and sell products and services. And that is definitely what will be expected of you when you leave the SCA and go and work for clients. And what you're doing is an absolutely wonderful thing, because I hope you realize that every time something is sold as a result of you producing a piece of creative work, then somebody else gets paid. And it isn't just the person in, say, the shop in which that purchase is made. The person who gets paid is the person who made the thing in the first place, or who grew the thing, or the person who designed it. The person who gets paid is the person who did the packaging for it. The person who gets paid is the person who worked in the warehouse where it was stored, and the person who drove the truck that delivered it to the shop to be bought, okay? And your lives touch all of these people when you produce advertising that sells. When you create demand for a product or service and it gets bought, you are helping all of these people. And I hope you just think about this over the course of your career. How many hundreds, how many thousands, maybe millions of people's lives you will touch by doing this, your commercial purpose. And I think that that is what Mark thinks you're here for. Now, Tim and Laura are no doubt going to tell you that you should also be there to promote a social purpose and that your work should be solving social problems. I imagine that's what they're going to say anyway. And this is great. This can be done, but it takes a rigor and a ruthlessness that I think is beyond most marketing people. It requires aligning the social purpose with the product, the proposition, and the positioning. Now, Shepard Jidenga, I hope you're listening in, Shepard. You wrote to me and said that Nike is your favorite example of purpose and huge, huge profit. And yes, this can be done. But I think if you can differentiate yourself and can credibly differentiate because of the practice that adds value to society, that's fine. But I think that brands that do that are outnumbered 10 to 1 by those brands that use a fig leaf of virtue to disguise their commercial intent. For example, I don't think that Cadbury Dairy Milk has got bugger all anything to do with solving the problem of loneliness amongst the elderly. Cadbury Dairy Milk in September 2019 announced with great fanfare that it was getting into bed with Age UK in order to address the problem of loneliness amongst the elderly in the UK. And I think their activity stopped in March, which just about coincided with the arrival of coronavirus in the UK. And Cadbury's Dairy Milk have been absolutely silent throughout April, May, June, July, and August, when old people were eventually let out of the private hell they'd been living throughout summer. So I don't think that Cadbury's Dairy Milk has got bugger all to do with helping solve the loneliness crisis here in the UK. I don't think that Kit Kat has got bugger all to do with helping people with mental health issues. I don't think that Sprite has bugger all to do with helping solve the problem of online bullying. And I'm damn sure that Sunny Delight has got bugger all to do with helping people who've got suicidal tendencies. You mentioned Alain Jope, the CEO of Unilever, and he is, as you say, warned against this woke washing. Okay, but I think that, as he indicated, that these are gimmicks that brands pick up and will drop as soon as the next gimmick comes along. So when you're working at the SCA this year, the briefs that come through to you, I would hazard a guess that perhaps 5, a maximum of 10%, you should address as a social purpose initiative. And that is using Unilever's own rule of thumb. 5 or 10% of all initiatives are of a social purpose nature, okay? Because if you don't do that, I think Mark will frown upon your book as a result of it, and you'll be producing work that the mainstream would find ridiculous. My advice to you would be to actually do work that the mainstream finds interesting, and that is what's in it for them, okay? That self-interest is the great motivator. You don't need an evolutionary psychologist to tell you that, just your common sense. But if you need a couple of facts, I will give them to you. Andrew Tenzer and Ian Murray of Reach Solutions conducted some research amongst the advertising community and the mainstream, and asked them what were the motivations for buying goods and services, okay, and they gave them a list to choose from. And this was the conclusion. The inconvenient truth for social virtue advocates is that even at the height of the COVID-19 crisis, it's good old-fashioned attributes like value for money, reliability, product and service, and customer service that are top priorities for the mainstream and for advertisers too. We have identified a clear disconnect between one of the dominant narratives in our industry and practitioners' beliefs about what actually works. The simple fact is that even people in the industry don't believe social virtue matters to the mainstream audiences. So why do we do this? Why do we get it so wrong? Why do we still bang the social purpose drum when we don't even believe in it ourselves? Well, Andrew and Ian say this. They've discovered after the 3 years of intensive research into the advertising industry, the one that you students are going to be joining in less than 12 months' time, that we find the same basic pattern being reinforced time and time again. Advertisers and marketers diverge from the mainstream on every major psychological, behavioral, and attitudinal framework that we have explored. They inhabit two different worlds. And that is the world you'll be joining, hopefully, next summer. And I think you should be warned about it, because it is different from the outside world. Inside this bubble, for example, 80% of the people you'll be working with have got a degree or a master's, and that compares with 26% of the mainstream. 70% of the people you'll be working with are from the main breadwinner in the family when they were growing up was from an AB social background. So they are the most affluent people in the country. The national average is 24%. We're also 87% white. But actually the 13% of people from a BAME background are even more middle class than their white counterparts, because 69% were privately educated as opposed to 7% in the mainstream. Okay, so if you are a working class person, I think we're going to show a film from, I won't tread on your lines, Laura, but if you're a working class person and you haven't been to university, you will be completely out of your frame in this, and you will have to conform. And believe me, the advertising people around you will make you conform, right? Which brings us to our politics. Okay, our politics, we are twice as likely to be left-wing than the mainstream, and people in advertising outnumber people on the left, outnumber people on the right by what would be 4 to 1, okay? And we are, if you are on the right, or if you're not even politically motivated, then the chances are you best keep your head down, because the people on the left will tell you what you should be thinking. Tim runs a Twitter feed, which he advertises as the chairman of D&AD. And I'm sure that most people follow him in order to get up to speed with what's happening at D&AD, but he carpet bombs the people who follow him with his political messages. D&AD will itself try to indoctrinate you. The incoming president of D&AD, if I can find my note. Incoming president of D&AD is a chap called Naresh Ramchandani. And upon his arrival, he's made it clear that brands have to be politically minded. Now, Naresh is not talking about right-wing or centrist. He's talking about left-wing politically minded, because he's left-wing politically minded. He says purpose-led work is going to be the next generation of creative's most powerful tool. So he's decided that purpose-led work is that this is the line that the industry will take. And he said that his overriding mission is to raise standards within the industry with a focus on sustainability, diversity, and the next generation of creatives. So he's going to raise standards, which is D&AD's remit, and he's going to focus on you, the next generation of creatives. But his real focus will be on sustainability and diversity. And it's kind of an implied message that unless you get on board with that, the chances of you winning a pencil might be slightly less than otherwise, okay? What D&AD is doing here is, while D&AD should be raising the standards in the industry and nurturing creativity, what you just heard there is an organization that is trying to channel the industry into a certain kind of work. And I find this absolutely ridiculous. But you're not stupid. It's a terrible thing to impose upon you, but you're not stupid, and you realize which way the wind blows, and you realize the rules that you've got to follow. For example, with Campaign's Cream Awards, which is aimed at finding the stars of the future. There were 20 winners. My friend Laura had been one of them. I think she won the first prize, God bless her. But of the 20 winners, 17 of those 20 winners was purpose-driven. Only 3, maybe 2, could remotely have resulted in somebody putting a hand in the pocket, pulling out their credit card, and actually purchasing anything. Okay, you are being brainwashed. You are having an orthodoxy imposed upon you, which limits your ability to do your job. And what I would like you to do is to break out of that orthodoxy. Now, I would like the leaders of the industry to actually help you with this and give you the encouragement to do this and give you the freedom to think clearly for yourselves. And I'd like you to actually take your lead from the people outside the bubble. I'd like you to take your people from your lead from ordinary people, the ones you will be working for, i.e. your customers. You want to know what makes them tick, what keeps them awake at night, what they want from life, and what they want from the brands and the products and services that you'll be dealing with. And that, if you do that, then that's your commercial purpose. My God, it was never more necessary. We are facing a recession of unprecedented proportions. Already, in summer, 237,000 small businesses had closed down. 2.5 million people are claiming unemployment benefit. We're looking at 4 million to 4.5 million people unemployed in the next couple of years. And so what I want to remind you of, if you want to do something, if you want to change the world, if you want to be a force for good, then remember this, that every time you sell something, as a result of your creativity, somebody gets paid. And you're keeping factories open, you're keeping jobs open, and you're keeping families away from the misery of unemployment. And that, I think, is your purpose and what you should be concentrating on in the next 12 months.
Right. Well, thanks very much, Steve. I think, Tim, if we just go straight into you, please. Thanks.
Sure. I'm sure Steve won't mind me saying this, but I've never heard such a load of doctrinaire nonsense in my life. So I'm going to talk about the book, and I'm going to sort of try and unpick some of the arguments in it and expose what I think are the confusions in it. So, Steve, the argument you set out in the book is binary, that agencies are either fully committed to capitalism and growth, or so encased in a metropolitan elite bubble that they've forgotten what they're for, what they do, and how they get paid. This is because we're apparently all lefty snowflakes, out of touch with the real world, and in this context, looking for purpose, sustainable growth, ethical practices, more gender balance, and better diversity and inclusion is an abdication of our only responsibility, which is to be the rocket fuel of capitalism. That's your quote. And you know full well that it's much more nuanced than that. Bambach's and Ogilvy's injunctions to sell or else were made in much simpler times. The world faces real problems: climate change, resource scarcity, widening inequalities, racism, the rise of the fascist right, hostile foreign powers, vulnerability to disease and cyber attack. These and many others are all pressing issues. Focusing on advertising, we are at the very least complicit in encouraging overconsumption. And while consumption does indeed create jobs, wealth, prosperity, and tax revenues, it's also at its extremes destroying the only planet we have. There's a thing called Earth Overshoot Day, which is the day in the year when we use up more resources than we can ever replace, and it's sometime in early August now. So clever and creative people in all walks of life have to be part of the solution to this, individually, corporately, by sector, and by industry. So you can mock Unilever for their wokeness, but their plan for sustainable living was an intelligent response to a complicated situation. Carry on as normal isn't intelligent. Post-COVID, go back to where we were before isn't intelligent either. And by the way, when did woke become an insult? There was an article that I read the other day by Sam Leith that said wokeness is just about being aware. The word originated in the Black community. It's about being interested in other people's culture and their politics and their aspirations. And that article was, by the way, oh, it's in The Spectator. So Unilever haven't turned into philanthropists, by the way. They have directors and shareholders. If it didn't work for their business, they would have changed their management and their strategy. Same goes for P&G, Rabobank, Patagonia, many other large successful companies, and of course, countless smaller ones. They've all found that paying attention to people and the planet can also create profit. As you acknowledge, it's not just millennials who care about this stuff, so it makes business sense for corporations to care about it too. And when the commercial and the sustainability agendas intersect and become the same, good things start to happen. Even greenwash is a step in the right direction. As you also acknowledge, if you were starting your agency today, you would make it a B Corp. That means putting people and the planet on the same level of importance as profit, not instead of, as well as. And if your agency would do that, why wouldn't the clients you advise choose to do the same thing? By the way, your old agency sounds like a great place to have worked, a bit like BBH and Low Howard Spink, where I spent most of my career. And I strongly suspect, Steve, that your Friedmanite bark is worse than your rather liberal nibble. In fact, Steve, I'm not convinced you fully believe your own argument. So here's an example, 3 examples, actually, of how nuanced this all is. So I've spent the last 10 years invoking Lord Leverhulme's "we do well by doing good" statement, and the attention to his workers' welfare in Port Sunlight that made him a millionaire. Then post-Collister, I learned that his business was an indirect financial beneficiary of slave labor in the Congo. The fact that there are Marxists and extremists using Black Lives Matter for their own political ends doesn't invalidate the legitimate concerns about police brutality and institutionalized racism held by millions of people in the US and elsewhere. And the fact that some of the people behind Extinction Rebellion are extremists doesn't mean that their main aim, to move action on climate change up the political agenda, isn't a sane response to the climate crisis. We, individuals and organizations, are all a mixture of good and bad, and so are our legacies. This is not a black and white issue. Right now, agencies have a fantastic opportunity to regain some credibility and respect and move back up the food chain by giving their clients the right advice at a time when we are all accelerating into our digital futures and no one has a map. Of course, part of that is selling their stuff, but an equally important part is helping them profit and grow in a way that conserves resources for future generations. This is not an anti-business message by any stretch of the imagination. It is not good business to accelerate climate change with all the concomitant consequences. All go back to work and let's return to where we were pre-COVID and forget all the lessons learned isn't the right response to our current situation. And single-mindedly being the rocket fuel of capitalism doesn't cut it anymore. We've hidden behind the "we're just advocates" shield for far too long as an industry. We have to become responsible global citizens, and that means facing up to the very real challenges, commercially, socially, culturally, politically, and environmentally. So advertising can be part of the solution, or it can continue to be part of the problem. I do agree that the digitization and automation of what was once a considerable craft that engaged with the mainstream has been weakened, and perhaps fatally weakened for no discernible return. For sure, its potency is very much reduced. But that's why D&AD's mission is to stimulate, celebrate, and enable excellence in commercial creativity, not to save the world, but to help the industry do the right things well. For you, apparently, Steve, that is portentous moralizing, as you accuse me of in your book. But for a lot of us, it's simply the right thing to do.
Right. Thanks very much, Tim. That was tremendous. Laura.
Hi. Thank you. Right. I have not prepared an amazing talk like Tim, nor have I written a book about this like Steve. But I'm really pleased that I came last because, look, Steve and I in some ways couldn't be more different, but we also couldn't be more the same. Actually, I read the book and I'd like to suggest that you all read it. Number one, for a different point of view. Number two, because there's a lot in there that is really, really great. And I think, you know, we even have the same advertising hero in Gossage, actually, which I kind of, you know, and Steve's book on Gossage is brilliant. I can attest to that. But, you know, he says changing the world is the only fit occupation for a grown man or woman. And I would just like to, I guess, talk to that for a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I guess, kind of my experience coming into advertising, and then talk a little bit about where I sit within this whole conversation. So my experience has always been the only woman in a completely man's world, coming from a digital background, coming from a technological background, and coming as a creative as well. You know, I grew up in a family where I had a father in the armed forces and a mother that left school at 11 because she had a severely disabled dad, and we all lived together. So, you know, not from big grand beginnings either. And I was passionate ever since I guess kind of started in art and then moved into advertising about two things. Number one, that creativity can absolutely change the future, change the world, change people's attitudes. That's why like advertising works, right? That's why we do it. You know, it can change it for the better or it can change it for the worse. And the tools are in front of us are so potent and so powerful. But you really have to, again, as Steve said, like walk the walk. So I've really committed myself, and that means, because I'm still running an agency here, to making really difficult decisions as well about where you kind of sit in this mix of I guess, you know, capitalism and wanting to sell things and doing things for your clients, and also try to be purposeful and doing the right thing for the world and the planet, and really importantly for me, other people as well. So yes, our role as advertisers has never been more important right now to get the economy going. Like, our superpower is actually something to be proud of. You know, I think years ago when I did a talk, when I was president of D&AD, actually, I did a talk called, you know, is advertising a dirty word? And you look at how advertising is even taught in secondary schools, and I'm sure, you know, if you've done a unit on advertising or the world of advertising at high school, at secondary school, you would have, you know, come across, you know, arguments around objectifying women, about making people buy stuff that they don't need, about all of this bad stuff. And I really love advertising a lot. I love it, absolutely love it. You know, and I love working for brands and building them and making them better. But I think you can do that if you're committed in a really great way. It doesn't matter, it doesn't mean you succeed all the time, but, you know, moral leadership isn't a bad thing in this situation. Trying to do the best with what you have is you know, is always a good thing. It doesn't mean that every piece of advertising has to have a purpose. And, you know, when you do look at Cannes and you do see that every single piece of work there is very purposeful, you know, you do go, where is the space for the laughs and the japes and the, you know, the good old fun times, I guess, that we used to have, although probably not in my lifetime, because I think things were already moving towards purpose really by the time I hit advertising. But I think practicing what you preach, as I said, it's hard. And I think if I was talking to you as students, like I said, sometimes you need to make decisions for other reasons. Sometimes you need to balance what is best for purpose with, for example, what is going to keep the people in your own agency employed. And those decisions as a leader, but also decisions at your end, are really hard as well. Students always ask me, how do you reconcile working on things that you find not morally right? And I think, number one, everyone has their own moral compass, and I'm not going to look down at anyone if they want to work on a particular industry or what have you. But I think you always have to compromise, and you always have to make difficult decisions, but with a bigger, further goal right in front of you. And every little thing that you can do to change what it is that you're doing today does make a difference. And I can say that from someone that started, she says, with 2 people, and we're now 70,000 members across the world. You know, I'm putting in a lot of work at the moment, and I'll talk about it later, to a new platform, Ready for Business, that brings underprivileged young people and business people together in a mentoring situation to really kind of help them get into the world of work. I think it's really important that you make and do the things that you talk about, as Patrick said, and not just complain to campaign about stuff. I would say the other place where you can't go wrong, and again, I think this is where my point of view on it is different, but actually almost what Steve and I are saying is the same. We just come from different points of view, is about the audience. Now, coming from a digital background, I've come from a background that uses design thinking, right? So I am incredibly used to working and understanding audiences, having empathy for that audience, really spending a lot of time with that audience to understand what they want, what makes them tick, and how I can actually remove friction rather than, you know, I guess traditional advertising, brand advertising has always been more about like entertainment or impact, but digital creatives come from a different space. And so that is still at the core of everything that I do. For example, I'm working on a brief at the moment the company has two very different audiences, and actually the big challenge is reconciling them, because one, to Steve's point, doesn't give a shit about the environment and just wants a deal, and the other one is incredibly passionate about doing the right thing around the climate, but again, particularly around people and how people are treated. Those two things don't naturally come together, and so that is where the work is in what I'm doing, and that's where the work is in what you have to do. I think the difference I see between a brilliant student book and an okay student book, yes, it's the creativity and it's the ideas, but it's understanding the audience and actually being able to deliver something that I can see will work for them, will change them, will sell stuff to them, but will also move them, will move them in some way. I also think, to Tim's point, there needs to be some kind of higher purpose, because if we relied on kind of shareholders and shareholder value and money going back into businesses, big businesses, and nothing else, I don't know whether any of you watched The Social Dilemma over lockdown. It's a brilliant piece of film, but talks about what that process has done in terms of social media and how has really pulled apart some of the fabric of I guess human understanding between the left and the right, between the, everyone is seeing things as polar opposites a lot, because that fabric in the middle has been kind of pulled apart, partly because of focusing on shareholder value at the time when, if that is the only focus, it's almost to the exclusion of the world, the world still being around in X number of years. You're seeing climate migrants because of climate change. You're seeing, a lot of things that we've been talking about for a long time, right? And people have known about it for a long time, and things haven't moved. So there is a need to be talking about these things. It doesn't mean we have to be talking about them with every client. It doesn't mean we need to be virtue signaling. It doesn't mean that we, kind of suddenly eco warriors in advertising, because that's not what we are. But we can start to show a little bit more of a better future, and that's particularly important when we're showing diversity in advertising. And I know Steve uses an ad of Patrick's actually with an LGBT kiss from, I can't remember when it was, Patrick, and how actually the audience wasn't ready for that. But we do still have to be thinking about these things both within our ads. What are we showing? Who are we showing? Are we, and again, it comes back to being a digital creative. You can't stereotype as a digital creative because it doesn't get you to a platform that's actually engaging. So you need to understand your audience properly. And if you understand your audience properly, then like what you can show and what you can lift, and how you can move things in the right way. And I'd say that's incredibly, like, even more important when we're talking about diversity within agencies. So Steve was talking about the fact that we are very white, very middle class. There's a lot of stuff that is very, very similar, and more similar than any other industry in our industry. And that really needs to change. And that takes and is an enormous amount of effort as well. It's, what Mark works so hard on every single day is to make sure that all of you, the ones entering the industry, are really, really different. Mark Pritchard been speaking to him this week, so he's the head of P&G, and I had to do an audit of my entire team to show him the diversity in my team, because it's incredibly important for getting to those different ideas. And I guess that gets me to my last point, which is it's great to have a contrarian view. Like, it's great to have a Steve for every Tim. It's great to be able to talk about these things in a really open and positive way. And it's great for you guys to keep your minds open to all of these things as well. I have my viewpoint. I really feel like with hard work and understanding and empathy and creativity, most importantly, we can be trying to fix some of the stuff that maybe we were part of breaking. But it's just as important to be listening to other people as well and making your mind up for yourselves. And I would say things like, Patrick and I were talking beforehand, things like the fact that massive digital platforms have completely destroyed creativity in that space are a much bigger threat to us than brand purpose, or not brand purpose, actually. If I was going to say what's the biggest threat to our industry at the moment, it's the fact that 80% of budgets are going into a place where there are no longer human beings making creative choices, right? So I would just say, hold on to your creativity. I think, you know, in a way, all of our hearts are in the right place, even though we also have very different points of view, and just embrace that in yourselves and in each other and people in your team, and best of luck. And yeah, there are agencies out there that won't make you turn you into a left-wing robot. I absolutely promise.
Laura, I think you've just said something really germane there. So before we throw this open, which is that all three of you do have very, very different backgrounds. So Steve is the most successful creative director in the world of direct marketing. Now, direct marketing is about short-term communication of one sort or another. It's about making the sale now. Tim, of course, comes from this fabulous background of brand building, which is about long-term. And so in many ways, I can see that someone like Tim and that above the line, as we used to call it, advertising background, is really interested in Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. You know, Simon Sinek said, if you look at the Golden Circle, most brands will tell you what they do. You know, say Dell make cheap computers. Then some brands will tell you in their advertising how they do it. Toshiba tell you that they make their computers with Intel chips. But Steve Jobs said, we make computers so you creative people can change the world. So the why. So the purpose of Apple wasn't a moral direction, but what it was to release, if you like, their customers. So I see very, very different approaches as a result of your very different professional experiences. And I think yours as a digital creative director, talking about the threat to us from all of this media-driven technology, as opposed to the creative technology, which is just beginning to come, is very salient. Tim, for me, you said something really, I think, very, very important there, which of course is that this isn't binary. And we do have this terrible tendency these days, I think, perhaps down to pop journalism, I don't know, but of seeing things as being one thing or the other. And I thought your argument was very, very coherent for the fact that there has to be a nuanced way. And Steve, I felt that you admitted as much yourself when saying that between 5 and 10% of all communication can be, and probably should be, based on, if you like, those kind of socially important values, you know, the kind of values that we'd want to see in our children, the kind of values we're hoping that the students at the school will espouse. So if I've got a question, and I've got several actually, is the first, Steve, when you say that the students are going to be living in a bubble, some of them have come from the most extraordinary backgrounds. The scholarship students have really battled the odds to be there. Aren't they going to be puncturing this bubble as and when they begin to work in agencies like Laura's? You need to unmute, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. As James, who founded Commercial Breaks, will tell you, that if you transplant a working class kid into a middle class agency, it is very difficult for them when Boudica and Oscar come up and mentor them for the first week and then kind of lose interest in them. Then it's very difficult for that working class kid who isn't in the bubble to maintain their respect, their self-respect, their interest, yeah, and their dignity, because as James says, they usually end up in a corner, ignored.
Yeah, I agree, Stephen. Actually, I've hired quite a few people from James,
yeah,
for long periods of time, and you need to make sure, the students need to make sure that they're going to the right place, and the leaders need to make sure that they understand what's involved in taking someone on and actually integrating people properly, like giving people a sense of belonging, not just saying you're here for a diversity quota. I think that is like a horrible loop that a lot of agencies are stuck in at the moment.
But as we know, it is the diversity we should be aiming for.
Oh my God,
it's the diversity of different opinions, the diversity of different backgrounds. And we don't seem to be shining a light on that, you know, kind of, and it's something that we should be doing.
Yeah,
so.
and I know obviously Tim works hard with Shift as well to
well, I've got Tim, I've got a question for you here from the audience, if that's all right.
Can I just say something to that last point, Patrick,
Yeah.
very, very briefly? This is one of the areas where I completely do agree with Steve. I think diversity and inclusion are huge factors in creating a more effective industry. And actually, it's got worse, not better. When I came into the industry 1,000 years ago, agencies, in particular creative departments, in fact, creative departments primarily, were much more demographically diverse than they are now. They were all blokes, admittedly, but there were many different ways into agencies at that time, through the post room, you know, through the studio, you know, as a runner of some sort. And actually, agencies were better for it. And, you know, fees and the cost of living in London, university fees, have actually disproportionately deterred people from less advantaged backgrounds. And the fact that you need A-levels to go to arts universities, you know, as opposed to O-levels to go to art college. So I think addressing the diversity issue is a hugely important thing in making our industry more effective and more efficient and
more creative
solutions for clients. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree about that. I would think, Steve.
Okay, going back to something you said, so this is from Bert. Tim, you said creativity is no longer the rocket fuel of capitalism, but doesn't that do capitalism an injustice? After all, capitalism is what's going to help us solve things like the climate crisis. It's the most effective way of driving innovation through financial incentives and creative freedom. Of course, organizations exist within capitalism in different ways. Some have terrible impact on the environment, but isn't it their responsibility to think about this because they're the only people who can make these changes?
I actually didn't say that. Sorry what I actually said was being the rocket fuel of capitalism is not our only responsibility. And of course, I think advertising is a hugely powerful tool in driving sales and changing attitudes and behavior. That's why I came into it. It's a fascinating thing to be involved in. And it's been a great career. Well, not a great career. I've enjoyed it, is what I mean. My point is that's not the only thing that agencies should be delivering for their clients. I just want to read. I really hesitate to disagree here with the sage of Berkeley Square, Jeremy Bullmore, but I'm quoting from the book, Steve. Advertising's role is to provide best advice to clients on how to meet their business objectives. Absolutely. And then to harness what skills it has in order to achieve those objectives. Absolutely. It has no remit to take stands or choose sides on political, cultural, or social issues. But what if that's the way of giving best advice, is to take sides on those issues and to give advice about that stuff in this?
But Tim, are you objective? Is it objective advice? I mean, when you said you came up with a list of problems that the world now faces, and I feel sorry for the students at the SCA, because I think you also listed hostile foreign powers is one of the things that they're now going to have to combat. What I think that is the D&AD, whose remit actually is education on the community by encouraging the understanding and appreciation and commission of good design and advertising, is the big problem that you should be addressing. Perhaps isn't hostile foreign powers; it's the crisis of creative effectiveness, which the IPA has identified. We're not doing work that works anymore, Tim. And if you look at the only awards that actually reward work that works is the IPA Effectiveness Awards, and there isn't one purpose-driven campaign in this year's book. And you should, I think that you're leading these poor students down a dead end, but a dead end driven by your own, I don't know, fixations. You and the people at D&AD. I think it's confusing for them. And I think that they should focus upon that which, at the moment, the industry is in crisis about. We're not doing work that works, Tim. And you have a responsibility to help us get over that crisis.
Could I just, I mean, it's not as black and white as that, but I just wanted to jump in, Steve, because actually I've got a piece of work in this year's IPA Effectiveness Award that is purpose-driven, but it is purpose-driven for a purpose. And it's for Volvo, which is not your naturally most eco-friendly thing, but it is talking about their new electric cars. and they are trying to make quite a big difference there. And it is a piece of work that we're really proud of, because it is those baby steps in terms of the business actually walking the walk and talking the talk. So I just wanted to jump in there because
Okie dokie.
it got a silver. Got a silver for you.
Yeah, Tim.
Once again, Steve, you're brilliantly oversimplifying a very complicated issue. If you look at
patronising, Tim.
Please.
If you look at the kind of work that D&AD has awarded, and I've got huge respect for the IP Effectiveness Awards, but they do a completely different thing. Very high standards of proof. D&AD is about great ideas beautifully executed, as you know, because you've judged for us. There is quite a lot of purpose-driven work. D&AD doesn't make the awards. You know that. We have no influence whatsoever on the pencils that get awarded. It's the juries that decide that, and the juries are very senior, accomplished, and
they all live in the same bubble, Tim. They all live in the same. They've all drunk the same Kool-Aid, China
and Shanghai and Singapore and Sydney.
Yes.
Around the world. I just think that is a rather crude characterization.
The evidence is there, Tim, that of the Wackles top 12 awarded campaigns of 2020, again, 7 of them were purpose-driven. It goes back to what Patrick observed in 2018, that the work we're awarding has no commercial purpose. 7 out of the 12 biggest awards in 2020 in the Wackle report were purpose-driven. Only 5 would be aimed at resulting in anybody putting their hand in the pocket and buying something.
That's you've gone binary again. This idea of purpose, core purpose, has been around for 50 years. That people were writing about it at Harvard Business School in the early 80s. So, you know, and a company's core purpose is the answer to the question, why are we in business?
No,
right?
there's a difference between the purpose which we would otherwise have known as a brand idea and a social purpose, which is to take on a social problem.
I'm sorry, you're confusing terminology here. That's not correct.
No.
Right. What I want to do is to bring you guys back to the topic, which is, do agencies have a point? And I mean, one of my observations is that while we do talk about award-winning work, which is often purpose-driven and inspiring because it does set a moral direction, if you look at the Drum every day and agencies are uploading their campaigns, if you look at Ad Age, and it's the same thing, I've got to tell you, first of all, that that none of it really appears to be purpose-driven at all. And I would say that 95% of creative people out there in agencies that still exist are doing their damnedest to write a TV spot or a radio commercial or even a press ad, God help them, to sell stuff. And so in some ways, what we're doing is we're kind of arguing, I suppose, about the direction advertising is taking. And yeah, as I said, I hope at the very beginning of this, my own personal opinion is ambivalent, because I do believe in the idea of purpose. I've just seen it kind of massively misused by woke brands. There's a fantastic word, by the way. If any of you read Bill Bryson, Tim, he introduced me to the word catachresis. And catachresis is what happens when a word changes its meaning to become the very opposite of what it originally meant, like sick. Do you know what I mean? Sick. But anyway, so what we've got here, a whole number of questions here. We've got Jason saying that the purpose of the 1980s and the purpose of 2020 are completely different. Would anyone like to amplify that? What we meant by purpose then and what we mean by purpose now is utterly, totally different.
I'll have a go. I think now, I think not everyone in the population and not everyone in the world, but significantly growing numbers of people want to buy things from companies that they respect, that they believe are doing business ethically, that they believe aren't despoiling the planet. Now, these are, and Steve and I might even agree about this, they are usually background factors. And there are other more important factors that come into play when people make purchase decisions, but they are factors, and they didn't exist 30, 40, even 20 years ago. And now they do. And agencies have to take that into consideration and weave that into their communication strategies and campaigns, because it's growing in importance. And we know that it is important because, you know, the planet is, you know, burning up.
We know that.
Okay, now hang on a second. Hang on, guys. No, I tell you why. Because we're nearly out of time, and I'm looking here at what all the students have been saying, and I've got to tell you that really interestingly, they're not terribly interested in the concept of purpose. You know, it seems most of the students here that it's going to be bloody obvious that they have to sell stuff, you know, one way or another. What does seem to be worrying them actually is really interesting. You know, so for example, do you think that analog print media will still be of any importance with the increasing dominance of digital? There's one specific question for you, Laura, saying that you're talking about technology takeover, and this is a massive threat. And there's several comments about that here going, well, what are we going to do about that? And then there are a lot of comments about the fact that most ad agencies seem to be obsessed with taking on people with degrees. Why, they're all saying. So actually, the students out there seem to be really more interested in the practicalities of working in an agency.
Yes.
So in terms of those practicalities, I'd like each of you to take just, you know, 1 or 2 minutes to offer some advice to the students before we take a look at their work and the name of the next cohort. So Steve, up to you. You've got 2 minutes to summarize and I hope to inspire.
I would learn my craft. I would learn how to build brands, and I would learn how to sell products and services. And in some of those instances, a social purpose will be germane to the proposition. But I would be wary of the route that you are being channeled down by some elements within the industry. And I'd be cynical and skeptical, and I would ignore the lead that you're being given by them. And I continue to take my lead from the mainstream people, the ordinary people who are out there beyond the bubble, and focus upon them. And they are your guide and your gauge.
Okay, so a little comment here that comes in from Alex, and he says to all panelists, so this is mea culpa here, actually we are interested in all of this. It's something I personally worry about quite a bit. What are we doing this for? Anyway, Tim, if you'd kind of give us a couple of minutes, that'd be great.
Again, I suspect Steve and I agree about a lot of this as well. I think the principles of good communication remain, and they're craft driven. It is about engaging intelligently with people and telling stories about brands and products that motivate them to do stuff, whether that's buy or change their behavior, whatever that happens to be. I think the opportunities to do that are fewer and further between, unfortunately. I could give you loads of examples of people who are still doing it brilliantly, both here and outside the UK, and both before and during the pandemic. But I don't want to finish on a bum note, but I'll say this. I think, you know, the digitalization of our business and the partial automation of it and programmatic buying have, I won't use the word destroyed because it hasn't destroyed it, evidently. It has seriously damaged our ability to engage with the people we need to engage with, or the people that brands need to engage with. And again, agree with Steve for the last time, you know, D&AD's role is very much, you know, standing up for creative excellence in commercial creativity, celebrating it, enabling it, stimulating it. But it's not a losing battle, but it's a real battle, no question. So,
Laura, for you, just to wind up, I think it would be, if there's any way that you can talk about the kind of advertising you think that this year's cohort will be making when they graduate.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
That's a brilliant question. I would love to see you make work, not obviously that's full of creativity, because of course you will be. I would love to see work that comes from a different experience and a different understanding of the world. And most importantly, I would love to see work that I can see will speak to the audience of that brand. And I think, like I said before, if there's one thing that makes a student portfolio great, not just good, it's not the brilliant ideas, because they can be, there are so many brilliant ideas out there. It's finding the right one to connect with the audience, to do the thing that you want them to do. So have a little bit of a think about that. I always recommend just going out and speaking to people. You know, I do a lot of people watching. I work on M&S at the moment, and I spend a ridiculous amount of time in M&S just watching people in there and seeing who's there, and seeing actually who the audience for the store is and what they really buy. And it really helps make your work better, understanding and talking to other people. So that would be my one piece of advice. And then I just wanted to answer the degree thing, because I know there's been a lot of debate about degrees. Not all agencies look for degrees. I certainly don't look for degrees. It doesn't mean that if you don't have one, you're at a disadvantage either. And someone asked a question specifically around, is there a creativity test to check for kind of neurodiversity or how people think differently? And I would say, look, that's an area in terms of agencies that I think a lot of agencies are just getting to terms with. With Ready for Business, we are going through this process again using design thinking to make sure that we are like accessible and open to everyone. And it was one of the first things that came out of our closed beta was how, if we're engaging with people through text, can we really properly engage with people who are more neurodiverse? So how do we engage with people with ADHD or dyslexia or like a number of other, I guess, diversities? And so we're actually working with that community to build it in. You know, there's nothing that formal, I would say, in any agencies, but there are good agencies that, you know, are aware of what neurodiversity is, and also aware of many other, you know, areas in terms of diversity, and we'll take that stuff into account. And I always say, like, hire for potential, you know, always hire for potential, not for the quality of the thing that is in front of you straight away, because people come from different backgrounds, and as long as you're hiring someone for potential, you're doing the right thing. I hope, yeah.
Right. Well, listen, thank you, all of you. I don't know about you guys. I come from a big family, and I think the advertising community in the UK is a family. Around D&AD, actually, that's what's brought us all together in our different ways. And of course, what happens in families is that you agree furiously. And I think we've had quite a lot of furious agreement earlier today, as well as actually some very different perspectives. I certainly think for the students who've been keying in today, there really is a point to agencies. They've been expressed very coherently. It's about providing best advice. And in many ways, you know, providing some of that best advice is about the kind of, if you like, social policies that your client company should be taking. I've got plenty of stories I can tell, nightmare stories I can tell about my days in network agencies where we failed to do that. But that, I think, is the end of it. Laura has said that she will continue chatting to people on Twitter if you want to keep going after this. Mark, I'm handing back to you now to take over to round everything up. But my sincere thanks to Tim, Steve, and to Laura for being magnificent tonight. Some really great stuff.
And to you, Patrick, what a fantastic discussion that was. Just incredible. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much. I was listening in, and in a minute I'll share the 3 videos that I've shortlisted and ask you to do one last favour for me, if you will, which is to tell me your favourite, and thus your 2 not favourites, and thus destroy 2 groups of students' dreams. But as I was listening in, for me, the word that Rory Sutherland, who I know is listening in, is in the audience. Rory Sutherland helped me find the North Star of the school 12 years ago, I think over a kebab. We found the North Star of the school is reciprocity. And for me, so long as every brand, so long as every human being behaves with reciprocity, that wants to bring more back to the well than they took from the well, then we'll leave the only planet, as Tim says, the only planet that we've got, we'll leave it in a better state. And I feel very strongly that those panelists that we had the pleasure of meeting this evening, well, they all embody reciprocity. Steve, over the years, has given time and books and wisdom and some of his artifacts to my students. Steve, the same. Laura, blimey, you've given students sort of first jobs and mentoring, and she says opportunities, and Can's opportunities. And Patrick, every single year you're there right at the start, and you see, you guys, you are the example of reciprocity. And so for me, what's the point of agencies? The point of agencies is reciprocity. Is to, I mean, there is only one industry, as I believe, where 1,000 practitioners have come together to write and deliver a curriculum through a school like the SCA. We are the embodiment of reciprocity. We pay it forward. We give our time freely, and we put money in the pot. There are hundreds of pounds that have been donated freely tonight, for example, for Ready for Business and D&AD Shift, for example. And if we can bring that reciprocity, that humanity to our work, then Christ, sometimes we will want to sell by the bucket load, of course. As Ogilvy said, we sell or else, and as we say at the SCA, we sell or we die. As Patrick, I think, taught us a masterclass once, forgive me, it may have been Steve, I think it was possibly both, the Procter & Gamble sign at the car park, talking to kill, Huggers killing Pampers, Pampers killing Huggers. So the point of agencies is reciprocity, to put something back, but to sell. And I think that's the story of this year as well. The story of this year at the school is, what's our point? Why are we doing this? And to express that, the students have made some sizzle films, and I've shortlisted my favorite 3. And I'm going to try my hardest now to play them over to you. Oh, Christ. Bit of luck. Pat, can someone, because I now can't see you, can someone just tell me, can you see a YouTube screen?
Yeah, we can see YouTube.
Oh, beautiful. All right, here we go. Hopefully this is going to work. All right, so is our agency going to be called Checkout? Is our first name? Hopefully you're able to hear that as well. There was a bit of a beat music going on in the background there. Or second video. All right, so are we Checkout or are we Control, or finally, are we? All right, so there are the 3 videos. Were you able to follow them along?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we have
What's the name of the third one?
the third one is submarine. So we've got checkout, control, and submarine. Illustrious panel, have you got any feedback that you wish to share? Any favourites? I must tell you, in my research, there is an agency called Control, so we may need to adapt that slightly. There is an agency out there with Control. You know, that might need a tweak.
Yeah, well, I quite like them calling themselves Reboot, actually, because especially in the context of tonight's discussion.
I thought that's what it was going to be, actually.
Yeah. So I'd vote for Reboot, but yeah, I kind of quite like the ambition of Submarine, to be honest, though it was a bit violent, you know, but it was ambitious. It said, this is what we're going to do. And it was about communication. So, yeah, so I think of the 3, as a creative director, I would change some of the copy there, but I like the ambitiousness behind it, the ambition.
Yeah, I really liked that one too. I liked there was kind of a positivity in the anger in that one, which I really liked. There was kind of an energy there, which was really good fun. Don't know about the name whether the name Submarine quite does it justice, but I'm willing to go with it, because it felt, that one for me felt a lot more kind of freeing in a way. Just, you know, I like the idea of going out and exploring the unknown and seeing what's out there, rather than just being, I guess, concerned with the here and now. So that for me felt really interesting.
Bearing in mind, Mark, that I'm a suit and know nothing about crochet, I thought the Submarine film was great, but I don't really see what how the name delivers against the sort of promise of the film. I'm a bit, and I like checkout, actually. I like its sort of retail overtones, and it's a sort of call to action, you know, check us out. I think it's quite sort of cheeky, and it's sort of in an era where most agency names deliberately choose not to mean anything. It has got a couple of subterranean meanings. I quite like that.
Choose a winner.
My 2 penneth. I think that if you've read your Orlando Wood, you'll know that Control is very symptomatic of the left brain thinking that's dominating advertising at the moment, and I would avoid that completely. Submarine, I haven't got a blessed clue what that's got to do with what you do on a daily basis. And as has been the case throughout the evening, I'm in complete accord with Tim on checkout. It's a bit transactional, but it does remind your students what you know, what's at the end of the ad.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with. I mean, are we voting now? Are we sort of there with checkout, or where are we?
I'm checkout.
Checkout.
Yeah.
You've got 2 checkouts and 2 submarines.
Yeah, I'd say Submarine with a different name. The only thing I didn't, because I really liked checkout, but the only issue I had was it felt a bit defeatist in some way, like when you check out of something, when you can't be bothered and you know, you've checked out of something. So that's where my head was, rather than...
well, I'll tell you what, we've just heard from Vicky Ross, and she said, check out, there's a call to action. So
the queen of copyright, she
exactly.
is the one who must be obeyed.
Yeah.
And Pete Kane as well.
Pete
says I'm scared of Pete. So yeah. I'm like, check out M&S. Oh, check out our new sponsor.
I think when you say that, I think it works really well. My head just went to I've checked out place. So that's why it turned me off.
Yeah.
You should avoid triple entendres at all costs, really.
Good. Well, there you go. You've got a decision.
We've got a decision, and I'm so very grateful. We've still got a bit of housekeeping to do. We've raised some money tonight, for which I'm very grateful. I don't have the final tally yet, but we check out at all costs. I like that. Is that A10 or A10? Is that A10 XSCA? God, you're always writing quality stuff, mate. Oh, thank you. Patrick, back over to you for some housekeeping.
Oh, I can't remember what I'm supposed to do now.
Oh, we're going to give Ready for Business a plug at the very least.
Well, go for it.
Oh,
So you said Rory was on here, which is great because this is something I'm doing with him. So, and also one of the amazing students, ex-students at SCA, who worked with me and Mr. President, and I've just hired back to Grey. So we've got the band back together. Noam, I'm sure you know Noam. So look, this came from an amazing person who is my business partner. We've been trying to get kind of a school off the ground, as Mark knows, which is going to be more of a physical school, helping young people into the world of work through a 12-week program focused around house music. It's called the House Foundations. Then COVID hit, and we've pivoted and brought a new team of people together to turn it into a bigger platform. And actually, we were challenged by, I don't know whether you know Ewan Sturgeon, who's the CEO at Wunderman Thompson, about how we would turn the House Foundation, which might help 80 students a year, into something that would help a lot more, I guess, youth. NEETs, I hate that term, but you know, it's the government term, not an employment, education or training. So we have built this platform. It is built around connecting people through psychometric profiling rather than asking people what it is they want to do, because we know that there's kind of an ambition lag. Often people don't know what it is that they want to do, or they're not exposed to different options. So this just connects young people with other people that are like them and gives them a six months worth of free mentoring. So we're in closed beta at the moment. We tried crowdfunding, it was a fucker. We're looking at other ways to get money to, you know, make sure this gets off the ground. But play an amazing video that Noam actually wrote and voices, which tells you about the platform.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that this and the other videos that I played earlier, the links will be in a YouTube upload that we'll put later, so you can watch them in case they're a bit laggy, because the quality of this, the writing, I'm so proud of this. I'm proud of the idea, but the craft as well. Some beautiful writing. Do enjoy.
Dear Mr. Evans, thank you for your email of the 6th of July regarding your Ready for Business project. Thank you also for the attached overview. I read of your innovative approach to helping young people into work with interest. As you rightly note, creating opportunities for young people to be productive yields both economic and social returns. Thank you again for taking the time to write and for your hard work in raising awareness of youth unemployment challenges. I wish Ready for Business every success in the future. Yours sincerely, the Right Honourable Kwasi Kwarteng MP, Minister of State for Business, Energy and Clean Growth.
At a time right now is the time for a fresh perspective, not the expected. Because from COVID to cops that kill, where's the hope? Where's the fighting will? One country, one pyramid, plenty of space to add difference to it. And for those not in education, employment or training, life has never looked so grim. That's 792,000 UK lives, and that's at the best of times. Motivation removed and opportunities very few. They have no choices, so they have no clue. I mean, people are choosing not to have kids because of the daunting future. But what about those that already exist? With help from you, we can find a way through by getting the youth ready for business. Give them the people, the purpose, the passion. Because at a time right now, we need to take action, shut our mouths, stop chatting. With 500k, we'll be well on our way to switching the stats, even inequality, all whilst doing our part to aid the economy. We are a team that come from poverty and privilege, so anyone can help for 50 quid. Over 6 months, we'll get to know those who want to change their fate, what they like doing, where they like going, who they'd want to be if there were no barriers in society. Using proved methods, they'll take a psychometric test, get paired with an industry mentor who they don't know, but really who knows them best. 3/4 of Fortune 500 companies use mentoring. The passing of knowledge is a powerful thing. In a world that's more take, there's no better feeling. Employees stay longer if it's something that's offered. 94% in fact. Now that's what you call something that works proper. Touching on resilience and mental health, our mentors will prepare participants, focusing on their strengths before looking at relevant industries to them. We'll open doors for them in training, with the support still there at every waking. And by the end, if it's all good, we'll agree the next steps where opportunity awaits them. They'll get set up on our tech-enabled platform individual to them and use our app for messaging, goal setting and scheduling. It's all remote, so no worrying about social distancing. Our relationship with established brands will help us drive sign-ups from mentees and mentors, some of industry and organisations' finest. We're offering the overlooked and the unheard, a free promise in their pocket of their potential to profit as a proper professional being. A community youth online space, where you're not judged on your gender, religion or race. Where grassroots are celebrated, where glass roofs are smashed, shattered and outdated. From employers we ask for £1,000 so you can be a champion for change. Access research pools and exclusive untapped talent. Be a part of something that others haven't. Because you can be that one that helped someone when they had no one. For your investment, you get the satisfaction of being part of what the government never actioned. From huge reductions in public spending to the general happiness of an entire nation. This is where it starts. Hopefully, one day there will be an ending. You know that saying, it takes a village to raise a child? Well, we are that village. The unemployed is that child. And when we raise problems without fear or being afraid, we find solutions that alone we could never have made. This isn't matching people up based on attraction. It's partnering people on shared experience and similar brains. The benefits are mutual, the gains are the same. You get to know the youth and they get to work, learning skills that are future-proof. We're not here to rebel or start a fight. We're here to bridge the gap, bring everyone together, unite. We are everybody's partner, and we all have a responsibility to level the line for what it means to have wealth. This isn't just for people, it's for our country's health. So when you next see the unemployment facts and figures on TV, know that you can change what you see, because if now is not the right time, it never will be. Let's get ready for business.
Oh, and that's the amazing gnome.
Wow.
Yeah, so look, that's something that Rory and I and a big team and Gnome are working on right now. If you're interested in getting involved, we'll be looking for people to explore that closed beta and just try to find the bugs in the system to make sure that the platform is robust enough to look after and like really care for young people when we start to open it up. If you know anyone with a stack of money, that would be great. But also, if you know any groups that really look after young people, I'd love to speak to them as well and get their crews involved. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Tim, we've raised a few £100 tonight for DNA Shift. Can you just mention why Shift is so important to our industry?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. So much appreciated. So Shift is a 12-week night school for people without qualifications, but with creative talent, who haven't managed to find their way into the industry. And we've run it for 4 years in London, 3 years in New York. We've become very good at finding these people. It's an incredibly diverse group. It's supported by the advertising and design communities in both those cities. And it's a night school, so people don't have to give up their day job, assuming they have one. We have about a 70% success rate in the people who go through the program, ending up making some kind of living in the creative industries. And we want to expand it. So to echo Laura, if anyone is out there sitting on a shed load of money, we'd love it to be in 10 cities. And actually, we're obviously talking to sponsors about making that happen. But it's a real skill. It brings the industry together. There's a queue of people wanting to take part in mentoring, teaching, providing food and drink and space and all that stuff in both cities. So it's a product, not a product, it's a program we're very proud of. So thank you very much, Mark. That is So much appreciated.
Great program.
And presumably both Ready for Business and D&AD Shift, they're both always looking for mentors and
100%. 100%.
Totally, yeah.
Beauty. Patrick, back over to you to wrap things up, sir. Thank you so much.
God. Well, I'm not sure there's anything I can really add. It's been an absolutely amazing evening. I've just loved the debate. I may have mentioned I publish a magazine called Directory. Two things. One, I'm going to, Tim, Steve, I think you wrote notes. So if I could have your notes, I'd love to publish them in the next issue of Directory. Laura, I'm going to have to get somebody to transcribe what you said, because I think this has been recorded, hasn't it?
Yes.
And lastly, if anyone wants a free copy of the last issue of our little magazine, just email me, Patrick at Direct New Ideas, or email Mark and through him, and I'll send you an electronic copy of that. Lastly, I said a moment ago that actually we're a family. We are a community. You know, creative people are often very different to other people because we have ideas. You know, as Steve was saying in part of his chat too, that often we feel very different. We feel that we're not part of the mainstream, and that is our great value. You know,
in weakness, Patrick.
That, and so for me, that's what this evening's been all about. It's been about people being unafraid to express their opinions, however different they might be to each other's. And as I say, discovering that we have more things in common that we do not in common, if you see what I mean. So I've had a tremendous evening with friends and people I admire and respect enormously. I hope all of our audience out there feel the same. We've had some amazing people in the audience. Let's just keep this going. Let's just keep talking about this because, yes, agencies do have a point. And so good luck to all of you at the School of Communication Arts. You've got a great year ahead of you. Make sure all of these buddy people come in and talk to you because they're good. On that note, Mark, I'm out of here.
Patrick, you deserve your glass of red, and everyone else the same. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in Brixton if you're allowed to be. Have a really safe rest of your year, and I look forward to showing our students when they're at the end of their year, show them back to you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.